Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We have a really sprawling, multi-layered deep dive for you today. We've pulled insights from 6 major sources across India and its neighborhood.
And we're really investigating a fundamental tension that seems to tie all of these topics together.
Exactly. It's this conflict between, ambitious national growth and the hidden costs that are often paid by the most vulnerable citizens.
We're going to start with a major editorial on Kerala's looming fiscal and moral collapse.
Then we'll pivot to India's grand strategy for becoming a global defense exporter.
From there, we hit the ground in Sri Lanka to survey the devastating crisis following Cyclone Diva.
And then we'll examine a terrifying human-animal conflict in Uttar Pradesh.
After that, we shift gears to urban restructuring, looking at Hyderabad's revolutionary plan for a nighttime economy.
And we'll conclude with the stark human cost of the Polavaram mega project in Andhra Pradesh. So, okay, let's unpack all this crucial material. All right, let's start with this editorial. It's a powerful, almost desperate call to action titled Beyond Cynicism, a Vision for Kerala's Renewal.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, Kerala was once celebrated globally as the Kerala model, right? A triumph of human development.
But this source argues the state is now just paralyzed by severe economic and moral distress. It's calling for brutally honest, radical reform.
And what's crucial to understand is that this isn't, a short-term blip. The crisis is quantifiable, and it's deeply structural.
The debt levels, for instance.
Yeah.
The article describes them as completely unsustainable.
Right, because the borrowing isn't going into strategic revenue-generating investments.
Yeah.
It's being used to plug routine deficits. We're talking about just ensuring salaries and pensions get paid.
And the specific detail that shows the scale of this debt trap is, well, it's staggering.
It is.
Kerala now spends more money on debt servicing than it allocates to its development projects.
Precisely. They are prioritizing past mistakes over future growth. That's the fiscal death spiral right there in action.
So to keep the state running, what's funding the gap?
Well, the state is increasingly reliant on remittances from non-resident Keralites, combined with just soaring liquor taxes and lotteries.
And the source calls these economic pillars emblems of desperation.
Which is a very strong phrase. And this financial disarray is coupled with what the article terms a moral crisis.
A culture of institutional entitlement, a breakdown of the work ethic. It sounds like it's all fueled by political patronage and just bureaucratic complacency.
It is a deep malaise, and the analysis gets very specific about the structural roadblocks. They demand the immediate abolition of 2 really entrenched labor practices.
Okay, what are they?
First, the extortion-based nukukuli. Now, for listeners who might not be familiar with it, this isn't a fee-for-service.
No.
It's the practice of organized groups demanding payment just to watch other laborers unload goods. They threaten coercion if the payment isn't made.
It's essentially a labor protection racket. It just disrupts productivity and drives up costs for everyone. What's the second practice?
The coercion caused by hurdles. These
Yeah.
are mandatory political strikes or forced business shutdowns. The problem isn't the right to strike itself, but the practice of these politically enforced widespread closures that paralyze the state economy at a moment's notice.
So abolishing these practices is what the editorial calls radical surgery. It's about restoring the dignity of actually creating something in Kerala.
Exactly. And given that deeply entrenched culture, the proposed fix to the governance structure is also systemic.
How so?
They want to depoliticize the bureaucracy and implement a radical regulatory overhaul. We're talking slashing 75% of existing regulations.
75%? That's huge.
It's monumental. And the flagship reform is creating a single window, one Kerala permit system for entrepreneurs, farmers, builders, everyone.
So the goal is to change the culture from control and gatekeeping to one of seamless facilitation.
Yes. And moving beyond those structural fixes, they envision a whole new economic model because the state can't thrive on just retail and remittances forever.
So what does that new model look like?
It's entirely centered on high-tech, specialized knowledge, and sustainability. They're pushing for targeted investments in fields like biogenetics, AI, quantum computing, space tech,
A real future-forward vision.
and high-end ecotourism. They also suggest a Kerala savings mission to mobilize investment from the diaspora through state development bonds.
But I have to ask, if the current system is characterized by this moral crisis and decay, can they realistically attract the world-class talent needed for AI and biogenetics?
That's the critical intersection, isn't it? The editorial implies that without that fundamental governance reform, cleaning up the bureaucracy, restoring integrity, the high-tech dreams remain just that, aspirational.
You can't build a Silicon Valley on a foundation of no kukuli and paralyzing hurdles.
You really can't. And while these huge macro changes are debated, the article concludes by pointing to 3 immediate escalating crises affecting everyday Keralites right now. First is environmental damage. Unchecked quarrying, sand mining. It's threatening the state's rivers and forests. Second, there's a growing critical drug crisis among the youth.
And the third?
And third, maybe the most visceral public safety issue, is the stray dog menace. The source gives a truly alarming figure.
I saw that.
By August 2025 alone, 23 people had died from rabies, with reports of fatalities even after they received post-exposure vaccination. It's a tragic indicator of failed public infrastructure.
It really paints a sobering picture of a state at a critical inflection point. Okay, now we shift focus dramatically. We're moving from a domestic crisis of governance to India's grand strategic aspirations in the defense sector.
Right. The goal is to transition from being one of the world's largest defense importers to becoming a self-reliant global powerhouse.
And historically, India's defense manufacturing was just. It was hamstrung by restrictive policies and an excessive reliance on imports.
It really sidelined its own domestic private industry for decades. But what's fascinating here is the speed of the change recently.
The policy shift has been rapid.
Comprehensive. Opening the sector to private industry, liberalizing foreign direct investment, and perhaps most importantly, corporatizing the old Ordnance Factory Board.
And that strategic push is yielding measurable results, isn't it?
Absolutely. Defense production is up significantly, and the success metric is tangible. Defense exports are now reaching more than 80 countries.
It's not just about building things, it's about establishing geopolitical leverage.
That's it. And this push for Atmanirbharta, or self-reliance, is so critical right now. It's beyond just national pride.
Why is that?
Because the global security environment has become so volatile. The conflicts in Europe, West Asia, Asia, they underscore the extreme fragility of international supply chains.
So for India, with its persistent border and maritime challenges, relying on others for critical hardware is just not a viable option anymore.
No. Plus, India's strategic location and its ability to offer cost-effective, reliable defense platforms give it unique leverage.
But achieving that ambition of, 50,000 crore in defense exports by 2029, that still faces some institutional hurdles.
Oh, definitely. The main drag is still regulatory complexity, which hits smaller players, MSMEs, defense startups, the hardest.
So things like export licensing, joint ventures, tech transfer, all of that needs to be simplified.
Drastically. But the most critical structural reform needed is changing the role of the DRDO, the Defense Research and Development Organization.
How does its role need to evolve?
The analysis suggests a clear division of labor is essential. DRDO should focus almost entirely on high-risk frontier research.
And leave the production to others.
Exactly. The crucial tasks of production, scaling up, and commercialization must be systematically shifted to the industry, both public and private. This is standard global practice.
Makes sense.
And finally, the source stresses the need for a dedicated, professionally staffed export facilitation agency to cut through red tape and provide a single-window interface for global partners.
Our next source takes us south to Sri Lanka, a nation still struggling with the fallout from its 2022 bankruptcy.
And that profound economic pain was then just compounded by the devastation of Cyclone Ditwa in late November.
Experts are suggesting the recovery from this storm might be even harder, more complex than the aftermath of the 2004 tsunami.
The scale of the human cost detailed in this article is, well, it's staggering. It's heartbreaking. Across the island, 643 people were reported dead.
With 237 of those fatalities just in the Kandy district alone, and 73 people are still missing.
And the geographic scale of the disaster, when you look at the UNDP assessment, it really puts the economic figures into sharp relief.
It's catastrophic.
The UNDP estimated that 2.3 million people, that's roughly 10% of Sri Lanka's entire population, were living in flooded areas.
10%.
Geospatial analysis showed floodwaters inundated over 1.1 million hectares. That is nearly 20% of the country's total land area. The infrastructure losses are massive. Damage to roads and bridges alone is estimated at LKR 75 billion.
And statistics tell a story, but the human accounts, they make it real. We read about Nandika Kumari's family, whose home just started sliding into the earth, forcing them to take shelter in a temple.
And then there's the tragedy of T.G. Nandavati, a 65-year-old woman. She worked for decades in West Asia and on tea estates, used all her savings to build a home.
Only to lose every single thing to the floods.
She says she feels done, having to start from scratch just to get a basic meal. It's a gut-wrenching cycle of loss.
And if you look deeper, the article highlights how this cyclone didn't just cause random damage, it brutally exacerbated pre-existing structural inequalities.
Yes, particularly for the Malaya Tamils.
This is that critical connection to our theme of development versus dignity.
It is. The Malaya Tamils are a community that has been historically marginalized. They live in these precariously situated colonial-era line rooms on tea estates.
Which makes them inherently vulnerable to landslides.
Inherently. And critically, this same community bore the brunt of the 2022 financial crash as well.
Oh, so.
As part of the austerity required by the IMF restructuring, their superannuation funds were reduced when the government restructured domestic debt.
So they lost their life savings, and then they lost their homes. They're paying the price for the nation's failures twice over.
It's incredibly unfair. And now, many of these estate workers haven't even been called back to work since the cyclone hit. No compensation for lost workdays.
Just immediate income loss.
And what's perhaps most politically revealing is that the enormous scale of these losses, it didn't prompt a single tweak in the national budget that was passed shortly after.
So instead of prioritizing immediate relief, the country is seeking an additional $200 million loan from the IMF.
Correct, which emphasizes the activist perspective that recovery can't just be about massive, centralized international aid.
It has to focus on bottom-up economic recovery, expanding social protection, and centering the smallholder farmers and fishers.
Because real recovery, as the source concludes, can only truly begin when the entire citizenry feels the burden has passed and the poor are not left to bear the costs of everyone else's recovery.
Our next deep dive takes us to Bahraich in Uttar Pradesh, where a horrifying and persistent wave of human-animal conflict has gripped the region.
It has. Since September, 11 people, including 9 children, have been killed by alleged wolves.
And the accounts are genuinely difficult to read. They're so brutal. We hear the story of 4-year-old Star, dragged from his home into sugarcane fields and mutilated in daylight.
And then there's the case of 2-month-old Subhash, taken from a home they didn't have a secure door, at night. Only a skull fragment was found later.
The terror is forcing families to organize nighttime vigils, with residents just staying back to guard their remaining children.
And this isn't entirely new for the region, is it? The response is called Operation Bedia 2.0, which suggests this has happened before.
That's correct. Bahraich saw similar attacks back in 1996 and 2002. Last year's Operation Bedia used camera traps, soft toys soaked in children's urine to lure the animals.
The sophisticated tactics.
And they captured 5 of the 6 wolves identified. But this year's response has been much harsher.
Shoot at side orders. 6 wolves have already been killed.
And what's unique about the attackers this time around, according to officials?
Well, the district forest officer notes a critical behavioral evolution. He says the animals are smarter, fearless, and more cautious.
They're avoiding traditional traps and drone surveillance.
And attacks used to be primarily at night, but now they're happening at all hours of the day.
So let's talk about the environmental drivers. Why Bahraich? Why is this such a hot spot for conflict?
Bahraich is naturally situated on the Gagura River floodplains, surrounded by dense grasslands. It's a natural habitat for the endangered scheduled wolves.
There are only about 3,000 left in all of India.
Exactly. But environmental stress floods, changes in the river course, combined with man-made factors like encroachment, has caused a drastic shortage of natural prey.
And that desperation drives the wolves toward villages.
Where the tall, dense sugarcane fields planted right up to the village boundary provide the perfect cover for an ambush.
This is where the source introduces some critical scientific scrutiny, a debate. We have the official reports, but scientists are questioning the exact identity of the attackers.
That's the key layer of complexity here. Experts are asking if the attackers are purely wolves, or if they could be leopards, hyenas, maybe even large organized feral dogs.
And past studies have found that these attacks often correlated not just with animal behavior, but with social vulnerability.
Yes. Studies from the Wildlife Institute of India found that victims often came from the poorest sections of the community.
Homes without basic security, like doors or internal toilets.
Right. It correlates attacks with parental neglect due to extreme poverty, leaving very vulnerable children exposed. And this brings us to a major policy distortion.
The incentive.
The Uttar Pradesh government offers a generous incentive of 5 lakh for every death officially attributed to a wolf attack.
So a large financial incentive like that could easily lead to misidentification. It could skew the data and misdirect efforts to capture the wrong animal.
Exactly. The scientific need to correctly identify the animal, which dictates the right mitigation strategy, is being undermined by the policy's financial incentive.
Right. That transition from a tragic rural landscape to a hyper-modern urban economy feels stark, but they both share challenges of safety and logistics.
That's a great point. Let's move to Hyderabad, which is rolling out a transformative nighttime economy, or NTE.
Right now, late-night businesses just close out of caution, like Giyasuddin's Bamboo Chicken Eatery, which winds up by 1 a.m. due to perceived police panic.
But that's all set to change come January. And this new framework is being lauded as revolutionary because it finally cuts through the bureaucratic hurdles that strangled all the previous attempts at an NTE.
And the key innovation is that the system is zone-based, not permission-based.
So break that down for us. What does zone-based actually mean? Why is it such a profound change?
It means the government will designate specific areas, high-tech city, parts of the old city, as NTE zones.
And once an area is declared a zone,
Businesses within it operate automatically. No individual permits, no licenses, no bureaucratic gatekeeping. The previous failures always hinged on requiring permission, which just meant corruption and delays.
so this new framework explicitly tells government officials to step away from business operations and just let organic growth happen.
It sounds like a seamless way to unlock economic potential. What's the projected upside?
The projections are massive. The NTE is expected to soar from generating 8,500 crore in 2025 to over 26,000 crore by 2032
And that's projected to generate between 2.1 to 2.4 lakh jobs.
across hospitality, retail, transport, security. And on a micro level, restaurant owners confirm it. They say up to 80% of their business happens in the last 8 operating hours of the day.
So if the government is taking a hands-off approach to business operations, who coordinates the essential services? Safety, sanitation, mobility. A city that never sleeps needs oversight.
And this is where the unique governance solution comes in, the appointment of a night czar.
A night czar.
The Vision 2047 document outlines this independent authority whose job is strictly coordination, not control. They won't issue permits or interfere with business hours,
Their job is purely logistical.
purely ensuring safety, sanitation, mobility. The underlying economic model is that the significant additional tax revenue from a thriving night economy will more than cover the cost of these extended services.
But the article is clear that challenges remain, particularly around hygiene and safety for late-night commuters.
Oh, absolutely. When you have this level of dense, extended activity, sanitation becomes a major challenge. The source mentions existing trash-strewn corridors as an issue even before the NTE.
So what are the proposed solutions?
Dedicated night sanitation squads, and crucially, extending public transport. The metro and buses will run until 2 a.m. to support night workers and patrons.
And for safety.
For safety and inclusivity, the plan includes pink patrols and designated women-only night hubs.
Our final source brings us right back to that central tension between centralized growth and human dignity. We're examining the stark human cost of the massive Polavaram project in Andhra Pradesh.
And the focus here is on the displaced Koya, Konda Kamara, and Konda Reddy tribes. They're legally known as Project Displaced Families, or PDFs.
This project is intended to irrigate millions of hectares and generate power, but it required the mandatory relocation of over 14,000 families.
Right, 14,371 displaced families. And the core problem is that these families were moved 40 to 50 kilometers away from their ancestral villages.
And critically, away from the Godavari River and the surrounding forests.
That distance fundamentally severed their traditional ecological and economic dependency.
What was the specific impact of that displacement on their cultural identity and their daily economy?
They lost their traditional livelihoods. Everything was centered on fishing, gathering forest produce, river navigation.
And the traditional don, the boat.
The don, yes.
Yeah.
A boat crafted from the bariga tree, essential for fishing and emergency transport. It's now useless in the new resettlement and rehabilitation colonies.
And their traditional diet has changed dramatically.
Completely. One resident, Ramadora, notes, "I haven't seen Vanjaloo fish since 2020 because families just can't afford fish anymore."
So the R&R process itself seems fraught with failures, especially the land-to-land compensation component.
LTL, or land-to-land compensation, is where the policy meets a very harsh reality. Many families were allotted land that is either unsuitable for cultivation, it's rocky or infertile, or, critically, lacks any irrigation access.
So it's useless land.
It's useless. In one colony, the source cites that only 4 out of 310 families accepted the LTL land because it just wasn't viable.
So having lost their traditional income and refusing unworkable land, what does their daily economic precarity look like now?
It's a constant struggle for cash. The women are forced to become migrant workers, traveling up to 50 kilometers one way to find seasonal work in tobacco and maize fields.
For meager wages.
About 350 per day, which barely covers their transportation costs. Meanwhile, many of the men, deprived of their fishing and forest work, often remain unemployed and take on childcare duties.
Yet, despite this massive displacement and failure of R&R, the article does end on a small fragment of hope.
It does, and it's built into the legal framework. The law actually provides a path back to a semblance of their old lives.
What is it?
Under the law, the PDFs are entitled to fishing rights in the Polavaram Reservoir once it's commissioned. The current deadline for that is 2027.
So for the Koya and other tribes, this hope remains a tangible anchor.
It does. They look to the future hoping they might regain our fishing rights. We wish to live the life we once lived by the river. This whole deep dive from the fiscal crisis in Kerala to India's defense ambitions, and then the displacement from Polavaram and the suffering of the Malaya Tamils in Sri Lanka, it really forces us to connect a central idea.
What's that?
If we look globally at the pursuit of these big national goals, economic growth in Hyderabad, massive infrastructure like Polavaram, we have to constantly ask, how are these projects truly calculating and ultimately paying for the hidden social and ecological price demanded from the most vulnerable citizens?
The difference between development and dignity.
It's often paid in the currency of marginalized communities.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.